So we'll go back to our agenda. We're under new business, or old business, unfinished business. First item this evening is an ordinance on second reading regulating group residential homes. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that Article 1326 of the codified ordinances of the city is hereby enacted, enacting regulations for group residential homes. There is one amendment that needs to be made to this tonight, at least one that I'm aware of anyway.
There's one amendment that I would recommend making, and it's the same one you're talking about.
It's under 1326.04, the zoning confirmation. It says prior to registration, a request for zoning confirmation shall be submitted to the appropriate office of the development director. We no longer have a development director, so it would be referred to the code enforcement office. So we need to change the language on that. So as we go through this, if you all would remember that, I will amend it to change the language.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
All right.
Whenever you want to make the amendment, you can do it now if you want.
Okay, so I would make an amendment to change the 132604 to switch the words code enforcement out for development director.
Switch the words development director out and replace them with code enforcement. Right.
Okay.
Second. It's moved.
I'll move it.
I did not, but I'll, thank you.
Moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, fine. It's been moved and seconded that we amend 132604 for the insertion of the words, for the removal of the words development director and inserting the words code enforcement in that slot. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question on the amendment. All those in favor of changing the language on 132604, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, so we go back to this now. An ordinance regulating group residential homes. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that Article 1326 of the codified ordinances of the city is hereby enacted, enacting regulations for group residential homes. I'll entertain a motion for the approval on second reading of that ordinance.
So moved. No.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance on second reading. Is there any further discussion?
Pardon me. Okay, so at the last council meeting, we talked about trying to amend this in some way to make it, I don't know. I mean, it's still discriminatory no matter what. But once again, I still have concerns because, well, I'll give you an example. Jack was here. I don't know if he's still here or not, but he's putting together this Freedom Festival, and you're talking about, honoring our veterans and all of that. And I think we all can agree with that. Under this ordinance, we're basically saying we're not welcoming veterans who may have an injury, whether it's a combat injury and they have a disability as a result, or they have PTSD. So what you're saying is if two or more veterans want to live together in a home and they have a disability, they wouldn't be able to do that without jumping through all the hoops that are in this ordinance, including, registering, etc.
Well, let me go through, because I don't know that I did an adequate job, in my estimation, last time of explaining everything. So I'm going to give myself, I had a judge tell me that if it takes more than 15 minutes to talk about something, people are going to stop paying attention to you. So I'm going to put myself on a timer. So just so everybody understands, city can implement zoning laws if the zoning laws attempt to reasonably protect the aesthetic quality of a single-family neighborhood, address legitimate health and safety concerns, are in the best interest of the Act's protected classes, which meaning I'm talking about the Fair Housing Amendments Act, and are not violative of the FHA's reasonable accommodation requirement. Every challenge that you have is going to, or every challenge to any of these types of laws, when they're implemented, are going to be reviewed by the court on a case-by-case basis. They're going to be fact-specific. And the impetus is going to be on the city to document any of their zoning or land use decisions, and that includes the approval and so forth, approval, disapproval, and what have you. So when you look at our ordinance does a handful of things. The first we go with is the purpose. The purpose is to permit the establishment of group residential homes, being compliant while remaining in compliance with the Fair Housing Act, to preserve the residential character of the neighborhoods by preventing a concentration of those residences in a particular area or qualifying residences. The proposed ordinance applies to a group residential home, but not a group residential facility. There's a difference. A group residential home is defined, and we're left with the definitions under West Virginia Code, as a building owned or leased by developmentally disabled or behaviorally disabled persons for purposes of establishing a personal residence. That's the definition that we were given by the state. A group residential facility is a facility that's owned, leased, or operated by a behavioral health service provider, which provides residential services and supervision for individuals who are developmentally disabled or behaviorally disabled. It is occupied as a residence by not more than 8 individuals who are developmentally disabled and not more than 3 supervisors, or is occupied as a residence by not more than 12 individuals who have that type of disability, and not more than 3 supervisors. They have to be licensed by the Department of Health and Human Resources, and they have to comply with the State Fire Commission. Our ordinance requires that the group residential homeowner submit a form to the finance director that shows the home is in compliance with the ordinance prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. If it doesn't comply, then a certificate of occupancy won't be issued. If it does, it shall and will be in effect as long as the residence is occupied, or until it fails to remain in compliance. It's not a crime to not be in compliance. The relief under this is injunctive relief. The city would have to file something with the circuit court asking for some type of relief or direction, or relief, or to direct the residents to become in compliance with the code, or to be prevented from acting as a group home. The request has to come to code enforcement. To confirm that the group home is permitted, the group residential home can't be occupied by tenants until the registration form has been completed and approved. Now, the standards are really the meat of the issue here. Realistically, the ordinance is saying that there has to be a minimum separation between group residential homes, not less than 1,500 feet. That the number of residents excluding staff is not to exceed 12, or 1 person per 200 square feet of interior living space, whichever is less. There's not to be any signs on the exterior to indicate that it's a group residential home, at least that are visible from the street. They have to remain in compliance with all applicable building and fire safety regulations. If they are required to be licensed, they have to comply with any applicable licensing requirements. Parking, they have to be in conformity with our parking ordinance. Tenancy, they can't house any person whose tenancy is a direct threat to the health safety of other individuals or result in substantial physical damage to the property of others. All administrative activities, including staffing, counseling, and other visitations, shall serve only the residents of the group residential home. Any reports of death have to be made to the or emergency response have to be made to the fire department, to the police department. There has to be a responsible party. There are additional requirements. If the state ever adopts additional requirements, they would have to abide by those. And importantly, for your example, as the request for accommodation, if the owner believes that something in the ordinance prevents the lawful establishment of a group residential home, they shall submit a written request for accommodation, the reasons for the need. The request has to have sufficient facts to allow the city to determine whether or not the accommodation should be made pursuant to the requirements of the Fair Housing Act, the ADA, or any other state or federal law. Requires the city to give a written answer and the decision that they make to be made public. The right of appeal goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals and then to the Circuit Court, and sets up a time frame for all that. So what you're looking at is we're having to balance 2 issues. And Ms. Williams pointed the issue out a long time ago, before the moratorium started, when the first group home was opened up in Vienna, and she brought in an individual who was concerned about people that were staying at the home, that there were some incidences there that required law enforcement to arrive. Vienna didn't really know it had an issue, but now it appears that we do have an issue, or the city has an issue, and is attempting to regulate it. So the question then becomes, well, how can you regulate it? Under the ADA and under the FHAA, there are instances where the city can put limitations on group residential homes that have been deemed acceptable by the courts. Licensing and registration, which is one of the things that we require here. The Fair Housing Act doesn't prohibit reasonable regulation and license procedures for group facilities. That comes from the Larkin case. There was an older case that predates the FHA where a group of college students got together and they wanted to live in a place, and the city had an ordinance that said no more than 4 people could live in one residence, but not necessarily relevant at this point because we're dealing with things that are post FHAA now. The courts have allowed density limitations. One of the cases to deal with that was actually City of Edmonds versus Oxford House. That makes a distinction between municipal land use restrictions and maximum occupancy limits. So you can regulate those. As far as maximum occupancy limits goes, under what circumstances can a city limit the maximum number of individuals who live in a single family residence? The problem with all of these FHAA and ADA things is they're all over the map. There's not like a bright line that you can look at, and which is why these cases have to be taken one at a time. The houses have to be taken one at a time. All of the circumstances have to be reviewed individually, because that's actually what the court did. And the city of Pasco and in the old Sunderland case, they found that a proposed group home, that the maximum occupancy limits that they made in their ordinance were arbitrary, but they've since subsequently upheld 4 times in the 9th district, but I'll get to that in a second. So the maximum occupancy limits, generally the courts are saying that as long as they address some type of legitimate health and safety concern in the infrastructure, plumbing, traffic, water service, the fact that the residences that are being adopted for these group homes are not designed for the number of people they could hold, traffic on the side streets could be affected, resulting in service issues to the residents in the area. They've even considered noise as a factor. Elliott versus City of Athens. Let's see, the 11th Circuit found the ordinance was reasonable under the FHAA exemption for maximum number of occupants because the city in that case had a legitimate interest in controlling density, traffic, and noise. And by density, it means the density of these places in proximity to each other. West Virginia, a lot of the municipalities that we see across the country that are governing these types of facilities are doing it under special use permits. The state of West Virginia, specifically under our statute, says we cannot use special use permits. And I think the intent on that was there would be a fear that municipalities would essentially zone out. You'd suffer from a bad case of NIMBYism. You know, everybody says it's a great idea until somebody puts a house in. But there's also another factor here that you have to consider is you now have a lot of these places that are exempt from zoning regulations that you could foresee individuals that are being taken advantage of in some of these facilities. And so the cities are forced to be put in kind of a balancing situation where they're trying to make sure that they're implementing an ordinance that protects people that really aren't being able to be regulated. It protects the public, but doesn't infringe on people's ability to live wherever it is that they want in the fashion that they want. The courts have allowed for dispersion or spacing requirements. There have been several cases that say, one case will say, well, you can't say more than 1,500 feet. Another case will say that, well, you can do it, but if it's 1,000 feet, that's fine. And you have to look at the circumstances, because one of the things that the courts were concerned with is for folks that have some type of cognitive or developmental disability is, and I don't like to use the word, but it's the word that the courts used, was ghettoization, where essentially you have an individual that runs a business and they buy 4 houses on a block and they put 16 people in those 4 houses. So you have 64 people in a house that they're not being regulated. They're charging $1,500 a month. They're not licensed by the state. So there's nobody from DHHR or what have you coming in and making sure that people are living in sufficient conditions. And so that's the other part of this is, yes, there could be some instances where folks are having to jump through a hoop. And there are instances where if the hoop's not there, you have individuals who are completely taking advantage of the lack of the city's abilities to regulate zoning. The courts have taken into consideration aesthetic considerations, sign placement, and so forth. And the last thing, and it was actually an unpublished Sixth Circuit case, Ham versus City of Vienna, Ohio. In that case, it said that the city did not violate the act by refusing to approve a rezone to allow plaintiffs to construct group homes for elderly and disabled people on their property. And the evidence that was adduced in that case was the decision was based almost on the city's desire to protect property values and the community's opposition based on the concern of their property values and not the disabilities of the residents. And what I'm saying is, if you can buy a house in Vienna, you know that you're going to put 6 people in it. They're going to charge those 6 people $1,500 a month. So you're going to make $9,000 a month in rent. And you're going to do that over the course of a year. So that's what did I say? 6 people, $9,000, $108,000. Well, you come in and you buy a house that was, the property value for the house was $170,000. You come in knowing that you're going to have for the next year $108,000, the next 2 years $216,000, the next 3 years you're going to have $324,000 that you've made on the property. You've affected the property values of the rest of the house, not by depreciating the value of the surrounding houses, but by pricing individuals out of neighborhoods that they would otherwise be able to afford property in. So the city's in a very difficult place, and so it's drafted an ordinance that is not as restrictive as the city of Costa Mesa, California. And I picked Costa Mesa, California, because they have, to the, I guess, the great surprise of a number of, attorneys, courts, and what have you, they had an incredibly restrictive ordinance. And granted, they did theirs through the special use permit process, but they had an incredibly restrictive regulatory system or scheme for regulating group homes, including sober living homes, where group homes, including sober living homes with 6 or fewer residents, plus a house manager, were allowed to locate in residential zones with a special use permit that required a public hearing, notice to all of the residents within 500 feet, written rules and regulations, a relapse policy, a manager being present 24 hours a day. The garage and the driveway had to be used for parking. The residents had to park on site or within 400 feet of the property. They had to comply with all of the regulations of the California Vehicle Code. There was no care and supervision allowed on the property. If a resident was evicted, the operator or owner of the property had to notify the resident's emergency contact. If the resident was evicted and had no place to return or otherwise was refused transportation home, the operator had to, if they were evicted from the place, the operator had to send them to another residence if a bed was available. They also required 650 feet of separation from another sober living home or state-licensed alcoholism or drug abuse recovery or treatment. They couldn't use alcohol or prescription drugs on site. The violators, if they did it, were to be evicted. There were limits on the number of occupants subject to sex offender registration. You had a good neighbor policy. You weren't allowed to have detoxification there, and so forth. And that was just for the ones that were property that are defined as group homes. That in that cases, that ordinance has been taken to federal court in the 9th District, which is one of the most progressive, I guess I'll say, because I don't want to say anything that's to minimize the court, but it's generally considered one of the more progressive courts jurisdictions in the country. And a jury has found in all 4 instances that these ordinances that were drafted by the city of Costa Mesa were not in violation of the ADA, were not in violation of the FHA. And they have the same types of restrictions for group homes that had 7 or more. We could go through the factors that they go through, that they have to go through in order to, and I think I didn't hit the start button. So,
Well, okay.
I'm just saying all of that so that council has a background of what their ordinance is that they're passing. how that compares to other jurisdictions. The fact that this ordinance is being drafted to try to not be discriminatory, but against individuals that have any disability, whether that is cognitive, physical, substance abuse disorder, but it also balances the interest of the public, and it's doing so in a way that's fairly unrestricted, as much less restrictive than an ordinance that has been upheld as being, that is far more restrictive and has been upheld 4 times now as being not violative of the federal statutes that have been at issue. So I agree with you.
But I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, we've had a long explanation here, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I still have to come back to what the ordinance says and what the state code says, which is that, it means a building owned or leased by a person with a disability for the purpose of establishing a personal residence. That's it. Okay? You can have, it could also mean that it's a facility where you have a behavioral, health service provider on staff. Okay, that could happen, and under those conditions, you have to have a license. You have to be licensed through DHHR, et cetera. Okay, so at the basic level, I'm talking at the basic level, we are saying if you are a person with a disability, that you would, and you try to either lease or own a home, then you're going to have to go through all of the stuff that's in this ordinance, and then what you're telling me then is that, well, we have a remedy here. It's 1326.08, which is a request for accommodation. So now you're asking somebody who has a disability that they have to go then ask for this accommodation and go through that. That is discriminatory, okay, on its face. And so you can take the word disability and you can replace it with any other word, any other term that's in a protected class. You can replace that with race. I see what you're getting at.
You can't replace it with race because it's not the same thing, because there are very clear, there's substantive case law that absolutely forbids any of those types of discrimination. There's statute in West Virginia. If you go down to the courthouse now and you go 60 years ago, there are deeds that say, black people are not allowed to, you can own this property unless you're black, basically. And that's not the same thing, because this is a regulatory thing that the federal government has set up. And the courts have allowed this specific issue. Those are two different classes. Those are under a legal analysis, those are two separate things.
I read this paper that was put out by the Department of Justice from 2016. I think I don't know if everybody got it or not, but Department of Justice and I believe HUD. And basically, when you boil it down, it just says that, you have to treat everybody the same. So if the ordinance is, if you're going to ask everybody who wants to lease or purchase a home that they have to follow through all the things in here, then okay, and that's fine, but that's not what you're saying.
I understand what you're saying. The Department of Justice has promulgated a number of things to be in accord with HUD regulations. And I understand that a lot of those are their policies so that they can avoid having to deal with certain issues that need to be dealt with. They have regulations, that discriminate against people that have children versus people that don't have children. They have regulations that discriminate against people that are elderly versus those that aren't, meaning if you want to live in a place that's a pool, you have to ensure that if you have children that there's supervision there, or you're not allowed to use your HUD funding to get to buy or rent or lease or whatever that property, which is completely discriminatory based on whether or not you have children. So I understand that the Department of Justice promulgates these rules and HUD promulgates rules and so forth, but even in their own rules, they allow for certain types, and discrimination is an ugly word, but they allow for lack of a better term, certain types of discrimination. And I don't think it's discrimination. I think that, like I said, I understand what you're saying, and that is possible. I don't think that, my opinion is, I don't think that that is how this is intended to be enforced. I don't think anybody wants to keep people that are veterans from living together, or people that are disabled veterans from living together. But they're not the only types of individuals that are that have a type of disability. And like I said, one of the problems that the city is forced to deal with is you have two separate classes of property owners, and there are plenty of regulations for one class of property owner that have been muted by the state. So if I want to come in and I want to rent this gentleman in the red a house, I can rent him a house. And my house has to remain in certain zoning compliances. If it's in a single family district, I can rent him the house. But if he comes in and he brings 10 of his friends in, and they classify for whatever reason as having some type of disability, he wanted to rent 10 friends and live in an R1 neighborhood. He couldn't do it because we have zoning regulations that prevent that. But if he comes in under the auspices of having some type of disability, he could do that. If I'm a landlord and I own 2 houses, this house I can rent and has to abide by all of the zoning ordinances that every city has, then I can do that. But if I want to rent it and call it a sober living facility or a group home for individuals that have a disability, I can put 15 people in a house at this point without any real oversight or any compliance with our zoning regulation. And that's the crux of this, is trying to find a balance. The city does not want to keep people from living in sober living homes. The city does not want to keep people from people that are disabled from living together. But there has to be some way to balance protecting their interest, because there is an interest there, because you can't tell me there's a landlord that wouldn't take advantage of being able to rent a $100,000 house for $15,000 a month to 10 people, versus the same landlord who is stuck with renting the house to one family or group for $1,500. There's no oversight to protect those individuals.
Well, you are creating a scenario where you're saying that there is predatory landlord that's going to do that kind of thing. That may or may not be true. But I think for me, man, I have to take a step back. If we're going to put an ordinance, we're going to codify this ordinance and we're going to put it on the books. 10 years from now, maybe none of us will be up here, okay? And it is now in the books. And so it can be applied and misapplied, really, because once again, you pointed to somebody out here that wanted to come, and if they...
I just picked him because he had a red shirt. Yeah. I have no idea. He looked like he was paying attention.
I'm sure he was. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Mr. Byers is a friend of mine, so I know he was paying attention. But if he wanted to come to Vienna with, 3 other gentlemen, and they had a disability, they would have to go and register with the city, follow the things that are in this ordinance. And I think it's discriminatory. And it may not be what anybody's intent is, and I understand the balance that you're trying to make, but you're throwing out everything to do that.
Any further discussion?
Call for the question.
To call for the question, Tom, there has to be a second, and then we would vote on that.
I just have, I guess,
Wait a minute, time out.
comments.
Okay. I heard no second. All right. Discussion continues, Chris.
There wasn't a second.
No, wait a minute. There was a second?
No. Mr.
I didn't hear.
Hazinger called for the question.
He did.
In order to call for the question, you have to have a second so that we can end discussion. There wasn't a second.
So we move
Discussion
on.
continues.
Chris.
I'll be very brief on this. I think, as someone that chose to move back to this area, I want to be very careful that we continue to make Vienna a welcoming place for all people. To me, the discussion that has been had has made a lot of assumptions about a specific group of people that have been through a lot of hard things. I don't think that You know, it's fair to assume that someone who has gone through detoxification of facility and is now looking for a place to restart their life is going to automatically bring down the property values of the home that they're living in because they have been through so much hardship. I think those people deserve an opportunity and a chance to be placed back into the community and have a chance to have community support around them. And I would hope that if a group home were to ever pop up in my neighborhood, that I would be able to support those folks and care for them and welcome them into my community and hope that they, you know, recover. And it concerns me that we are trying to kind of limit and constrain that and make assumptions based off of this ordinance that, and I think I said this at the last council meeting, a lot of the items that are even listed under the standards are already covered under our zoning codes and compliances. No one can rent a house and put 20 people in it if it only has 3 bedrooms.
Actually, and I don't mean to interrupt, the problem with that is the way that the state statute is written. We have almost no, the city has almost no ability to enforce ordinances on those houses. That's the problem, I guess, I'm trying to point out, is some of the things are obviously always going to apply. You're going to have apply with state fire marshal, state fire codes,
Right.
and you know, building construction codes, because those deal very clearly with safety. But as far as occupancy, number of occupants, and so forth, you can have 2 houses in an R1 district. One house that doesn't purport to be a group home would have to abide by our zoning ordinances. And as I read the state code, the second home, if it purports to be operated as a group home, which meets our definition, and granted our definition is broad, but that's the definition the state gave us, they wouldn't have to abide by the same zoning restrictions. That's the point that I was trying to make. And again, I'm not trying to say that what you're saying is wrong. I think group homes, people that are in group homes, and that's a misconception, are at the tail end of obtaining sobriety. Those are the people that you want to, and I'm not just picking on people that have substance abuse disorder, but that's the one that seems to have everybody's attention. Those folks are at the tail end of that journey, so to speak. They're trying to transition from when they were being affected by the substance abuse disorder to living in a neighborhood where they may have lived in a place where they saw drugs being sold on the street every night, or, you know, in other neighborhoods there was gunfire or whatever. Those people are in neighborhoods now where they go out of the house and they see, well, Edna's retired. People are going to work every day. There are kids in neighborhoods and schools and things that they see. I'm not here to comment on this. The question for me is it legal? This is why I think it's legal.
Yeah, and I guess my mind keeps coming back to the kind of preconceptions that people have about this, and I don't know. It seems to me that it's kind of above the municipality of Vienna to kind of control this. It's at a state level that I see that the state should probably be working to handle this, and it hasn't happened yet, and that's really frustrating. But I don't know that just because the state isn't necessarily doing their job, that we have the ability to step in and act on the state's behalf.
Well, it's not on the state's behalf, in my opinion. It's our responsibility to the people that live in this town. And I understand your comments, Chris, about someone that's at the end of the line and they're trying to put their life back together. And honestly, a person that came in and was trying to do that, you wouldn't even notice them in your neighborhood. But unfortunately, if you put 12 people that are total strangers into a house together, and unfortunately there are landlords that do not care. They would rent to anyone that could pay the rent and not look back. And because there is such incredible money that is being paid to these people for having these homes, it's big business. It's big money. Okay. And so the fact of the matter is when you get 10 people that are total strangers and the landlord doesn't do on site anything, and the property could be owned by some people out of state, it leaves us in a terrible predicament of how to enforce whatever we have to do in order to maintain these facilities. Okay? Because what happens is if the landowner lives in Colorado and he leases that house, to someone that's here, then who do you go against? The homeowner because he's the property owner? Do you go against the landlord because he's here? Or do you go back to that same argument that you've got too many people living in a house in a residential neighborhood that it was not designed for? And so that's my take on that, is that it's our responsibility to maintain our neighborhoods. And, I think that's what the people in town want. And, that's just my take.
I'm going to put a comment in there too. Stephen Covey is one of my favorite authors. He wrote 7 Habits, and one of the things he talks about is your circle of influence and your circle of concern. Kim's talking about characterizing this ordinance as being discriminatory on a federal level, and you're talking about on the state level, and Russ distinguishes what the state statute would potentially allow for now. All of this is subject to interpretation, subject to challenge in the courts, right? All right, so our circle of influence as elected officials in the city of Vienna is for our citizens. We're trying in a non-discriminatory fashion, in my view, to create an environment that allows for these sober homes within reason and conformance with our statutes and our codes and our ordinances, and at the same time protecting who we've been elected to protect. It's not our job, although we can lobby, it's not our job to change state law or federal law. It's our job to serve this community. So from my view, we can all have the circle of concern that we want to promote sobriety. We want non-discriminatory practices in our country, all right? But our circle of influence is in this room. And in this room, our citizens and the people that are here, and what I've heard is that we don't want to prohibit this, and we don't want to discriminate, but we want to protect our communities and the integrity of this city and what it is. The communities, you say, I would welcome someone in my community, and I understand that, and I agree, okay? But if it became a situation where there's 12 or 16 people living in a 1,200 square foot house, parking all over the streets, and they are enabled by state laws that's currently drafted, I don't think you would be okay with that, because it's disruptive, and quite frankly, that's not fair. So my point is, our responsibility is to the people within the city limits of the city of Vienna. It's not our job, and it's Kim. She wants to characterize this and make legal interpretations that are contrary to what our city attorney is saying. I disagree with her evaluations. I think there's ample precedent that says that the ordinance that we are drafting and attempting to impose is within the confines of non-discriminatory conduct that is designed to protect the communities for which we've been elected to do.
All right. And I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the ordinance on second reading regulating group residential homes, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? The ordinance carries on second reading 5-2. Second item on our agenda this evening is an ordinance on second reading, and this is amending Article 1371 of the Vienna Municipal Code, 1371, and regulating the location and placement of residential substance abuse treatment facilities. This is a resolution of the City of Vienna. Oops, pardon me, went too far. An ordinance amending Article 1371 of the Vienna Municipal Code 1371 and regulating the location and placement of residential substance abuse treatment facilities. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that 1371.03 residential substance abuse treatment facilities. A residential substance abuse treatment facility means a live-in inpatient facility or center providing substance abuse therapy or treatment to individuals. It does not include group residential homes as defined in West Virginia Code 27-17-2 or a residential care community as defined in West Virginia Code 16-5N-2K. A substance means both alcohol and controlled substances or drugs. No residential substance abuse treatment facility shall be located within any of the following areas: within 250 feet as so measured from each property line of a residential district, within 500 feet as so measured of a public or parochial school, within 100 feet as so measured of any existing residential substance abuse treatment facility. I'll entertain a motion on second reading for the approval amending Article 1371.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the ordinance amending Article 1371, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business this evening. It's a resolution authorizing participation in the Parkersburg Wood County Home Consortium for the period of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, and approving the fiscal year 2022 annual action plan and also authorizing the filing of the plans with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. I hope I have this name right. Andrew Thomas?
Yes.
Would you please give us your,
You guys have copies of the resolution and events here?
we do.
All right. Let's put one on the screen. See it. All right. Just some quick notes about what we're the home consortium on the money, or how we're spending the money for this, or expecting to spend the money. We got about $650,000 for this is combined with program income and what HUD is giving us. So Parkersburg is administering this. We also partner with the city of Williamstown, and Vienna, and Wood County to administer these funds. These are the programs we expect to do. So there's the community housing development organization. We partner with Habitat for Humanity for that. Tenant-based rental assistance, down payment assistance programs, owner-occupied rehab loan programs, and the low-income housing tax credit project, and just some general admin funds. If you guys have reviewed any of those, had any questions about them?
We've participated with you in for this for as
Yeah,
long as
it's-
I can remember. So.
Yeah, it looks like there's quite a few years on record
Okay.
with us.
Any questions for Andrew?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, under HUD, we have to be compliant with Fair Housing Act?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes,
that's very interesting.
yes, all of that is included in here. We go through plenty of steps on these. Most of the program, the way these set up to be drawn down, you absolutely have to check all the boxes to make sure you're compliant.
Okay. Anything else? I'll call for the question then. All those in favor of the resolution of the City of Vienna authorizing participation in the Parkersburg Wood County Home Consortium for the period of July 1st, 2022 to July 30th, 2023. Wait a minute. I have to back up. We didn't do a motion. I introduced him. He did the explanation.
Yes, you need a motion.
So, okay. I need a motion for the approval of the resolution of the City of Vienna authorizing participation in the Parkersburg Wood County Home Consortium for the period of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that we participate with Parkersburg in the Wood County Home Consortium. Is there any further discussion? And all those in favor of the resolution, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Andrew, I have a letter that's signed for that,
Okay.
but I just noticed that the date is wrong. So I will have that date corrected and I will mail it back to you. I apologize for that.
That's fine.
So we wanted to make sure it gets today's date on it instead of the wrong date, but I'll take care of that.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
It's right there. The next item on our agenda this evening is the CDBG application. Tony, if you would.
The application before you tonight is for the upcoming 22-23 CDBG program. The City of Vienna will be getting $100,852, and we're proposing to spend it with $37,926 for the energy efficient window door replacement program, $37,926 to the minor home improvement program, $7,000 for the senior citizen center to purchase a new stove, refrigerator, and washer and dryer, and then $18,000 for planning and administration. And just to give you a brief overview, during this past year, well, technically it ends June 30th, the city did 19 housing projects, which is a record for us. The city did a very aggressive marketing program and reached out to the homeowners, and we were able to do 19 homes.
And we did comply with all the
Yes,
public
we-
meetings and all the things that are required.
Yes, we did, and we complied with the timeliness issue, which was our main concern, yes.
Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
We're not ready yet.
I have a question for Tony.
You're not ready yet.
Okay.
Okay,
Just
I did it
tell me
wrong the
when.
last time, Kim. Okay? So I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Vienna that the following projects be included in the 2022-23 Community Development Block Grant application.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Kim?
It's just a question. Under this, do homeowners have to have homeowner insurance? in
No.
order- Okay. Okay, because somebody reached out to me that was a problem, that the city of Vienna was requiring that the homeowner have homeowner's insurance, but it's not a requirement under this.
There was an issue at one point, and I don't know if we're talking about the same gentleman or not, but anyway, the city reached out to him and told him it was no longer required.
Okay, so that's being applied to anyone then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? And all those in favor of the resolution approving the 2022-2023 Community Development Block Grant application, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Did you prepare this resolution?
Yes.
Can you redo one page?
Yes.
You won't-
afterwards, because I need your signature.
Gotcha. All right. So we move on to the ordinance on first reading, amending and supplementing the ordinances of the City of Vienna, building standards and codes codified as Section 1721, the State Building Code. The ordinance incorporates the changes to the West Virginia State Building Code promulgated by the West Virginia State Fire Commission and established by legislative rule as set out in Title 87, Series 4 of the West Virginia Code of State Rules. And this ordinance is on first reading. So I'll entertain a motion on first reading for the approval of the ordinance adopting the West Virginia State Code for the City of Vienna.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we amend the Vienna ordinances to comply with the West Virginia State Building Code. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor on first reading, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. So we move on to the resolution. Melissa?
Yeah, we're going to table this resolution for the Omni Financial proposal. I had put this on the agenda just in case we had it in time, so that way we would be in compliance with noticing and stuff like that. So we are going to table this for now, but more than likely, because our next meeting, the way the calendar falls, isn't for like 3 more weeks, then we will be having a special meeting. So you'll get notice about that when that time
So
comes.
you're asking for a motion to table the,
Yes, that's what I'm asking for. I would like a motion to table this.
So moved.
Thank you.
there's a second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We table the resolution for the financial proposal on the swimming pool. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor then, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda is an update on the Jackson Pool.
Okay, so we I've got a design team assembled. It's Steve Black, Tim Roberts, and myself. Each of us are going to be seeking insights and input from other people to then come together, the three of us, to be able to communicate then with whoever it is that we decide to hire. So that we have not officially hired anybody, obviously. I spoke with Omni yesterday with two gentlemen from there, Richard Foran and Jay Rogers. And they are right now working on task order number 1 that will get us up to programming that will cover existing conditions, help them understand the scope of the work, programming, and priority review. It does not include a schematic design. So they'll be, kind of working on how many hours they believe it's going to take them to get through that part of it. So that is what is going to be coming to us in a special meeting, and at that time, that's when we will decide if we are ready to enter into a relationship with them. And
So at this point, where you are is you've done an RFQ.
yes,
You've along with the other group or the rest of the group, have conducted interviews. You've each individually scored. Omni is the group that has the highest score. You're now working on determining what their, I guess, rate is going to be. And part of the consideration for the rate is they're going to have a couple of different ideas that so that they have an idea of what the scope of the property or the project is. All of that is going to be brought before council for council to consider.
yes,
And you're not making a recommendation, you're just trying to gather information so that council has a fuller picture of what Omni's proposal is.
yes.
And if council doesn't go or adopt Omni's proposal or rates or however, then the procedure is you go to the next highest score group where you're going to perform the same process.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is where we're at.
But ultimately, council is going to make a decision as to the scope and design of the project.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, so item number 6 this evening is the 12th Street property plans. Russ?
I'm sorry.
12th Street.
Right now, I would ask that this issue be tabled. I'm in the process of addressing the issue, and we'll just go from there.
And I don't know that it really has to be tabled. There's no resolution. It's just an
Oh, it was-
agenda item. It's a discussion item, so,
Well, as far as discussion goes, I don't have anything to add at this point. I'm
right,
in the middle
we'll
of
just put it back on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay? All right, that moves us to council comments.
Really excited about the Freedom Festival.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. There's a lot of excitement building for it. And Roger, I think the ice cream social was really one of the best we've had for many, many years. Yeah, it was great. So many people came out for that, so good job to the fire department. All right? Yes, they do. And I want to tell you all a story real quick. This past week, we all had the bad storms. And so there was I believe, a 93-year-old lady that a tree took out the power at her house. And so the electrician came in and repaired the electricity, but because it took the service entrance off her house, it had to be re-inspected before the power company would hook the power up. And so Dwayne Flutie, who is our main code inspector, came out over the weekend and inspected that so that lady could get her air conditioning turned back on, because if you all recall, it was 90 plus degrees. And so I just think that goes to show the dedication of our employees, that he didn't have to come out. He wasn't on working hours. He could have delayed it till the next day, but he came out, inspected it, electrician and the power company got her back in business, and she called. She was so grateful to have that done, and I think that, we're very fortunate to have people like Dwayne Flutie that actually work for the city of Vienna, so good job for Dwayne. With that, I guess that concludes our agenda this evening.